Hello, can you please give me your name and explain what Woodford arrangement you invested into? Thank you.
Hi, my name's Robert Campbell. I'm an individual investor, and I invested in the Woodford LF Equity Income Fund through Hargreaves Lansdown.
Thanks, Robert. And why have you agreed to have this conversation with me, knowing that we're recording it and that we're going to be putting it out there on social media and so on?
I wish to represent effectively the small investor, and to show people how this kind of event has impacted me, and my financial plans heading into retirement. I don't think that the decisions that are being made with a truly representative set of people. We're just going to get swamped with the institutional investors if we don't speak up.
Thanks, Robert. If I may ask, who is your MP, and would you be happy for us to send a link to this recording to your MP?
My MP, I'm in Newcastle Central, so my MP is Chi Onwurah, and I've already forwarded her a couple of things to do with this particular campaign. Some of the things recommended by yourselves at Transparency Task Force. So yes, I'm quite happy that you keep her up to date with whatever we're currently trying to do, and seek her support for doing that.
Thank you very much indeed. That's great. Thank you. Woodford. So why did you invest in Woodford?
Um, so I do have an IFA who looks after my company pension scheme. I was a company business owner until the end of this month. So there was a regular set of investments going in that direction, but there was a chunk of money that I speculated on my own, which started a long time ago, and represents about a third of my pension investments, self-invested pension scheme based around equity-based ISA with Hargreaves Lansdown. The recommendation that came from them in their regular newspaper, effectively, with the top 50, top 100 recommended funds to invest in. So this was one of those, and I chose it because of the article involved at the very beginning. And whilst they say it's not a recommendation, it's clearly one of their gold star investments, and that's what um, encouraged me to invest in Woodford.
Thanks, Robert. That's very clear. When you invested, what, if anything, was your understanding of your protections, your statutory protections through things like the Financial Ombudsman Service or the Financial Services Compensation Scheme?
I guess it was patchy. I have had dealings with the Financial Compensation Scheme because a company pension scheme of mine, when I was employed by somebody in the dim and distant past, their pension scheme went bust. So part of my pension is coming from the Financial Compensation Scheme. But that's all I knew. And I knew that there were, or should be, a basic level of compensation available should the fund or the platform collapse in any particular way. Then the £85,000 limit should have kicked in to some degree or other. But in terms of the specific implications of that, I was not particularly aware.
Thank you, Robert. In terms of how much you would get back through the scheme of arrangements, I'm not looking for monetary amounts, okay, but do you happen to know what the scheme of arrangement will give you in terms of pence in the pound? Or alternatively, if you were to have had a successful Financial Ombudsman Service claim, do you know what you might get through that?
No, I don't. I've had a quick scan through some of the things that Transparency Task Force has given us all to go away and try and calculate that, but I have been unsuccessful in being able to estimate what I might have got back. So I'm one of my complaints is that it's not really very easy for somebody like myself who deals in certainties and clarity to wade my way through an understanding of what would have happened.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you. In general terms, Robert, how has the scandal impacted you? What impacts it had on you?
So I've invested, I think, in total something like £25,000 into um, Woodford at one form or another. It doesn't include the minor proportion of the one of the other Hargreaves Lansdown funds that included some of the Woodford element in it. So it's the straight equity fund there. That represented at the time something like 20, 20% of my self-invested pension scheme um, in my own um, under my own steam, not that which was based on company pension schemes or anything else. So is that variability stuff there. So in getting back a very small proportion of that, that will take what I think should have been a significant growth in the fund over a period of time until it started to collapse. Yeah, it's going to impact me by a significant amount in terms of the free cash I would have to retire with.
Thank you. In general terms, what would your comments be about the FCA? How do you think they've handled things?
From what I can see, and I think the reason I've aligned myself with the TTF is the regulatory authorities, in my view, should be there to protect and stand up for the investors. And in particular, those investors who don't have the institutional backing of the bigger funds or the bigger institutional investors, because they're the ones that hold the regulations. They're the ones that should see propriety take place in the dealings and to stick up for those investors who have little resources around them to do anything. They protect us from rogue IFAs or rogue investment companies. That's what they should stand up for. I don't see any of that happening. I see the usual obfuscation and lack of clarity and lack of a stand which says we have to sort this out for those smaller investors like myself to ensure that they get a fair deal. And that kind of statement's not there. It seems like I need to get through this process without bringing down the rest of the investment market. It's the market that they're interested in rather than the investors.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you, Robert. The FCA have made reference to 77p in the pound. What are your thoughts about that phrase or what it might mean?
I refer to my earlier comment about lacking in the understanding of how to calculate what that means and whether that truly represents anything of value. At first glance, it might say, I'm going to get 77p in the pound back from what? My original investment capital, my predicted growth in investment, were the fund to have been managed correctly? Did it include any compensation for mishandling? It really is totally unclear and obfuscated. The one thing that's obvious to me is that the current scheme is looking at distributing something like £250 million again across all investors. And given the fact that my shareholding represents a minuscule proportion of the investment pool, I'm likely to get back 50 quid or some trivial amount compared with what I've invested in. So 77p in the pound is a meaningless, distracting figure as far as I'm concerned.
Robert, any thoughts about the scheme of arrangement or the voting process or indeed the outcome of the vote?
Well, the scheme of arrangement, and I'm a lead A. I got involved with lead A early on, and I would have some derogatory comments to say about them as well. They seem to have abandoned everybody on the basis of they're not going to make any money. So sort of, we're off, going to abandon everybody. There's been no question of the value of this dispersal. The process for voting was difficult technically, and I'm a computer. I've spent all my life working with computers, and it was difficult to do. And the results that have been published so far are meaningless because it doesn't. There's no baseline figures for how many people voted, what percentage of shares were voted with, who were the institutional investors that voted, who were the small people invested. There is no underlying understanding of the numbers that have gone through other than 90% voted in favour. 90% of what? Of who? Of how many? Of value? Of numbers of shares? Or what? And I'm really surprised that the voting process was not handled by a completely independent voting organisation, of which there are several, but some weird scheme that was put together by the people handling the process. So it neither inspires confidence, and the results are pretty, can't really interpret anything from the results so far. Completely obscure.
Robert, thank you. And your final question, sir, is this. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I think the issue for me was one about the legal companies doing will take this on as a class action effectively, and they've been poorly. I believe that they have poorly represented themselves. I had assumed that Lee Day, who have a reasonably good reputation as a law firm, would again take sides of those people who wanted to do something and push everything as really hard as they can. But I've since learned to be a bit more cynical about them, and fundamentally they were in it to make money. And as soon as it became obvious that they were unlikely to make enough money to make it worthwhile, they've basically dropped it and everybody else into some vacant hole, and don't really have any. I think really seriously again about doing or getting involved with anybody like that in the future.
Robert Campbell, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks.